A very warm good day to everyone joining us today in this UNECE Resource Management Week 2021, Day 2. Today we have session 3, a workshop on UNFC and UNRMS to support food, water, energy nexus and build back better from COVID-19 pandemic. I am Hari Tulsidas and I'm joined by Charlotte Griffiths in welcoming and Oleg Dubinsky in welcoming you to this session today from Geneva. We will be recording this session. This session will have simultaneous interpretation into English, French, and Russian. Please select your channel from the button at the bottom of your screen. All speakers are requested to speak slowly and very clearly so that interpreters could properly translate your words into the respective languages. All participants are also requested to provide your comments, questions, if any, in the chat box. We will try to reply to as many questions as possible during the time that is available to us. If any participant wants to speak, please raise your hand, and depending on the time available, the chair may decide to provide you the floor. You can also provide your comments via email to reserves.energy@un.org. This address will be shared in the chat soon. All presentations and recording will be uploaded to the meeting website soon. Now, I welcome Teresa Ponce de Leo to chair this session and hand over the floor to Teresa. Teresa, please.
Thank you, Harry. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. I have the pleasure to share this session for you today. And as Harry said, Teresa Ponce de Leão from Portugal. So I will start with some opening comments. Today, we will hear about a number of activities and case studies to implement UNFC and UNRMS in specific contexts. Integrated energy management and water management under the food, water, energy nexus is a key topic in which the expert group on resource management was active. Given the COVID-19 crisis, we have activities that look into UNFC and UNRMS, promoting sustainable resource management and assuring the supply of critical raw materials. Providing much needed support from micro, small, and medium enterprises under these harsh conditions was also looked into by several projects. These activities are generously funded by the United Nations Development Account and the United Nations regular program of technical cooperation. The European Commission also supports the development of UNFC and UNRMS through extra budgetary funding. We'll begin this session with an overview of the United Nations Development Program and the regular program on technical cooperation support with a presentation delivered by Mr. Oleg Dubinsky, Regional Advisor for Energy at UNECE. This will be followed by a number of case studies and other inputs by the distinguished experts from several countries. Finally, we'll have a keynote presentation on climate change and oil and gas industry, transitioning to a zero carbon world by Robert Keith Barons, Queensland University of Technology, Australia. We have a very busy program this morning, as you already have heard, and we will do our best to keep the time to stop at 12 sharp. We may, however, run over 15 minutes or so at the maximum. I encourage all of you to stay till the end. So I give the floor to Mr. Oleg Dzubinski that will from now moderate the case studies session, give us a keynote speech and moderate the case study session. So to you, Oleg.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you, Teresa. I will not call my presentation a keynote speech. It certainly isn't. What it will focus on, and I hope Harry will put up the presentation on screen. It's there. Thank you. So I will talk about the work. Sorry?
Yeah, please continue, Oleg. Yeah,
I continue. Okay, so if there are some noises, I ask again what Harry said. Please keep your microphones off if you are not speaking, so it allows everybody to hear the speaker, the presenter, in this case me. Thank you. So the title of the presentation is United Nations Development Account Projects and Regular Program of Technical Cooperation Activities of Relevance for the Expert Group on Resource Management. Harry, next slide, please. Thank you. So I will speak about several projects and activities that I lead as a regional advisor on energy at the UNECE and at the Sustainable Energy Division. So this slide is on the UNDA project Integrated Energy and Water Resource Management in support of sustainable development in Southeast Europe and Central Asia. We have 4 beneficiary countries in this project. They are Bosnia and Herzegovina, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Serbia. The activities before 2020 included the assessment of the existing gaps in data collection related to water and energy resources management and monitoring in the project countries, development of guidance and training materials on data collection related to energy and water management and monitoring, and national trainings on data collection. Last year, there were, as you well know, some problems related to the COVID-19 pandemic. So what we managed to do last year was developing 4 case studies, one for each of the 4 countries, on the experience of policy development or application of the existing energy and water resources management practices and monitoring. And later today, you will hear from our experts, consultants who developed the case studies in the countries, the main findings and recommendations. The case studies analyze opportunities and challenges in using UNFC for integrated energy and water resource management. And the developed case studies include specific energy projects in coal, uranium, and renewable energy, and associated groundwater resources, where appropriate socioeconomic, project feasibility, and confidence in estimates level of knowledge information are known. Quantities, volumes can be classified using United Nations framework classification. Specifically for the case study of Bosnia and Herzegovina, geothermal project Slobomir and groundwater bottling project Vidia are presented and analyzed. For Kazakhstan, projects on uranium deposit and groundwater utilization in South Inkai. For Kyrgyzstan, projects on coal deposit and groundwater resource. And for Serbia, projects on coal deposit Tamnava Westfield and on groundwater in the area of Mountain Zlatibor. Social, economic, and environmental impacts of the development of energy projects and their impact on the groundwater system were analyzed. Now we go to the activities that are planned this year, and this year is the final year of the project, so it's going to be busy, and it already is. We will have the project workshop, in fact, today, now, to share case studies and best practices for energy and water resources management, appropriate to the national circumstances of the 4 countries and to apply appropriate integrated management and monitoring tools interconnecting energy and water systems. So that is today. We also plan to develop 2 more national case studies because some activities we were not able to implement because of the lack of travel. So we could not spend the funds of the project to bring experts, participants to workshops, for example. Therefore, we have funds available, and our project management unit and the management of the project in New York allowed us to expand the project to 2 more beneficiary countries. So there will be 2 more national case studies developed for Tajikistan and Ukraine. That is in the amendment to the project that was done this month. Harry, next slide, please. I will continue with the plans for 2021. It's developing a background paper and conducting a training workshop on the topic of assuring diverse supply chains, local, regional, and global, for critical raw materials that are needed for a health emergency and for sustained vigilance. That amendment was done last year. It's amendment directly related to COVID-19, and we will implement this year. So for this, there will be analysis of the status of supply of critical raw materials in the 4 original beneficiary countries, that is Bosnia and Herzegovina, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Serbia. Options for expanding and diversifying supply chains for critical raw materials needed for health emergencies, and preparedness for future health emergencies. Next activity planned is developing guidelines on mine closure, remediation, land value capture, water management, and repurposing, with special reference to the beneficiary countries in the post-COVID-19 green recovery. And we will have a presentation today from Ray Pilcher that we can say that would be a kickoff for this activity. This is also in the amendment to the project of this month. Next, we will develop policy recommendations, or rather our national and international consultants will do it, for integrated energy and water resources management applicable nationally, taking into account the particularities of the countries and recommendations regarding the transboundary aspects. So these policy recommendations for now 6 beneficiary countries, so including Tajikistan and Ukraine, will be further submitted for the governmental approval and inclusion into relevant governmental strategies for further implementation. Policy recommendations will identify best practices, measures, and procedures relevant to energy and water issues, with a particular focus on the cross-cutting nature of energy and water management. And we plan to conduct a final workshop to present, discuss, and validate the policy recommendations for sustainable energy and water resources management for each beneficiary country, and disseminate the project results to other countries in Central Asia and Southeastern and Eastern Europe. At the moment, we cannot say whether it will be an in-person or online workshop or some type of a hybrid workshop. We simply don't know what the situation will be closer to the end of the year. So I will not try to second guess it at the moment. So these are our plans for this UNDA project. Next slide, please. Thank you. I will speak now about the UNDA project global initiative towards post-COVID-19 resurgence of the micro, small, and medium enterprises sector. Again, at the top of the page, you see the project website. The project started last year in response to the COVID-19 crisis. And last year and in early 2021, we have implemented the following activities on the topic of relevance to this group. guidelines and best practices for MSMEs to assure resiliency and progress towards the circular economy in sustainable resource management and critical raw material supply solutions have been developed by consultant Michael Hashke. Based on that and taking into account the specifics of the countries, we have selected 2 pilot countries, Tajikistan and Ukraine, for which customized guidelines and best practices for MSMEs have been developed. We have one activity for Ukraine is completed now. We have the guidelines and best practices for MSMEs for Ukraine posted on our website in 2 languages, English and Ukrainian. And we also had the training workshop in Ukrainian for the country. We also had a regional workshop on the regional study. For Tajikistan, the guidelines and best practices are also almost ready, and we will have the training workshop in the coming months. Next slide, please. Thank you. This is just the cover page of the guidelines and best practices for MSMEs. That's the regional study. Next slide. Here are the activities that we plan to have in 2021. With the COVID-19 crisis developing fast, and we see what is happening and how countries react, how economies react, it is important to update the guidelines and best practices, the regional study that we had. So we are now in phase 3 of the project, and we will have these updated guidelines and best practices. We will also have customized guidelines and best practices for 4 more UNECE member states. And as you see, they are those member states that participate in the other UNDA project, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Serbia. We will have national training workshops for these 4 countries. And we also will have a regional workshop on exchange of experience in implementing guidelines and best practices for MSMEs to assure resiliency and progress towards a circular economy in sustainable resource management and critical raw material supply chain solutions. Next slide, please. A very interesting study that we have done last year, also as a response to COVID-19 crisis, women entrepreneurship in natural resource management, challenges and opportunities for the MSME sector in the post-COVID-19 socioeconomic recovery. The report is available on our website. This was done in response to a request from Kyrgyzstan, and this is funded from the Regular Program on Technical Cooperation, or RPTC. It also includes case studies of 5 countries: Azerbaijan, Belarus, Georgia, Kazakhstan, and Kyrgyzstan. You see the workshop website here. On the study, on the report, our consultant, Ms. Kankana Dubi, has presented at this training workshop. You can hear and see the recording, and you can also see the presentation. And you will hear more from her on Thursday. She will participate in one of our sessions this week. Next slide, please. And that is the final slide. I would like to thank you. If you have questions, my suggestion is please put them in the chat, and we will monitor it, and I will try to respond to them. But right now, without further ado, I would like to now put on my hat as a moderator of this session, and we will start presentation of the case studies developed last year. And we will start with Mr. Boban Jolovic, Head of Department for GIS, Geological Survey of Republic of Srpska, Bosnia and Herzegovina. His presentation will be on application of UNFC to energy and groundwater resources in the Republic of Srpska, Bosnia and Herzegovina. Thank you. And Mr. Jolovich, the floor is yours. I would like to remind you that every speaker has up to 10 minutes. So it would be very much appreciated if you stick to this time frame. Thank you.
Thank you, Oleg. I will try to take the time and give my impression about the practically first official application of the UNFC in Bosnia and Herzegovina in 2 case studies, one related with energy, or more precise is with renewable geothermal energy, and the second one of groundwater. Why I decide to give just this geothermal project explanation is that in this project we have both components, the energy and the water, and it's more practical talk in detail about this one, taking in account that thermal water is something similar like fresh groundwater. Can I share my screen with you and control my slides? Or
yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, I will. Yes. You can see this correctly?
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you. As you probably know, the Bosnia and Herzegovina is quite complete country regarding the administrative organization, but in gist, there are 2 key units, called entities. The one is Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and second, the Republic of Srpska, which share about 50% of the Bosnian territory. What is most important to say in this moment is that mineral politics is quite independent and the responsibilities are on entities. There is no state ministry responsible for the mineral resources. Also, there is no any national strategy about the use of mineral resources. Furthermore, there is no state geological surveys. All these things, in accordance with the constitution, are in responsibilities of the entities. It is very important mentioned to understand Bosnian mineral resources politics. Very briefly, key mineral resources exploited today are in the first order coal, brown coal, and lignite, and it will stay in tension in next 10 years. There are also important production of iron, bauxite, lead, and zinc with the companion minerals like copper, gold, and silver. And what is maybe more important this moment that here is a serious potential in lithium and borates, also in the nickel and cobalt and antimony. As you probably know, very close to Bosnian border in Serbia is triggered a world-class lithium project led by Rio Tinto, and very close, just on the another side, in Bosnian side, there are very intensive explorations at the lithium in this moment, and we can suppose that it will be driving force of the mineral resources exploration in the next 10 years. Bosnia use very similar like Serbia and Montenegro and another countries in the region, some kind of old Russian classification, former Russia classification. You can see it when you see this AB, C1 and C2. But in Bosnia, a good thing is that in 2013, for the first time in some legal document, UNFC is mentioned. If you look in this picture left, you will find under paragraph 2 in row 2 term UNFC. That's a good thing. A bad thing is that here in this paragraph we have bad interpretation of the UNFC classification. These terms proved reserves for the A and the B, and the probable reserves for C1 more correspond to the CRISCO classification. But I repeat once time again that good thing is that people in the ministry and the local and the legal policy makers recognized this kind of the classification. all of
Boban,
these.
one moment. Can you bring your speaker a little closer to your mouth, because there is some problem in hearing.
Do you hear me? Is this better?
Yeah, that is better.
Oh,
Thank you.
sorry, I will take this one. As you probably know, like in other countries, all these categories are related with some acceptable errors. Of course, for the A category, you have just 50% of acceptable error and 30% for B category and 50% for the C1 category. If you look in some report or the elaborate on mineral resources and its classification, in that document you can find many elements which are projected in these three axes of the UNFC classification. For the example, A, B, and C1 categories are classified based on geological knowledge. One of the criteria is geological knowledge, and it could be projected on this G axis. On the other side, there is very complex technical and economic analysis, which put elements for social economic viability estimation, but also ecological aspects and the list of given permits. What is most important to estimate the project feasibility or F-axis of the UNFC classification. And that's more or less case in all classifications of mineral resources in the country. In this case, I choose one very interesting energy product based on geothermal energy, where primary product is heat. They're also very ambitious.
From who? From Lydia? Yeah.
Another projects related with aqua park, greenhouse food and herbs production, and so on. The temperature of the water of boreholes is 72 degrees, and the project lifetime is estimated till the end of the concession contracts is 2036. This project also triggered many very interesting economical aspects, like head office of one bank. There is located university, sport and recreation complex, and all these things are practically triggered by geothermal energy production. Infrastructure is very improved in last 10 years in this area, because the project one very nice bridge with the Republic of Serbia is constructed, many paved roads, and so on. And what is also, from my point of view, is essential is that this aquifer is considered as transboundary with the Serbia. It's in line with some things Oleg mentioned in his presentation, that in the future we can consider application of the UNFC on both sides in Serbia and Bosnia, and maybe consider how different experts see these projects. Regarding the environmental issues, it's clear that this project is a project of low CO2 emission. Consequently, it's in line with the Kyoto Protocol, Earth Summit in Johannesburg, also with the newest climate agreement signed by participants in the World Conference in Paris in 2019. It's in line with the national strategies, and the resource give opportunity to develop many other projects. Briefly, if we look into all these previously mentioned ticks, we can conclude that environmentally, fossil energy in heat sector will be substituted by renewable energy. It's very good because we expect low CO2 emission, which is applied here as technology, and these have very positive and quantified effects on reduction of coal consumptions. Socially, it will have aftermaths in clean energy, which will provide better residential conditions for the people here. Also, project trigger serious employment, new technologies are applied, and conditions for thermal water-based recreation and spa activities. this project, as I mentioned, is foreseen for the next 60 years because it is a period of valid concession contract. Regarding the technology, you can see some pictures and that really modern technologies applied here. Well is deep 1.8 kilometers. On the second picture, you see very modern heat plant, and on the figure right, see one of the numerous sub-surface installations used for the amplification of the residential buildings of the bank, of the university, future aqua park, and so on. It is the reason why I put this axis in F1. Also, in addition, is clear that all licenses are available, like, for the example, environmental study is verified by the responsible ministry, thermal water reserves verified by the Ministry of Energy and Mining, license for construction and special planning are in field, and the water permit is issued by the institution responsible for the water management. I mentioned it that concession contract is valid up to 2036, and it's the reason why I calculate the energy reserves for the period for the next 60 years in continuation. I don't want to talk too much about geology, but it's one of the most explored areas in the region, because in the area of 2,000 square kilometers, we have more than 5 deep boreholes. Each of the boreholes is deeper 1.3 kilometers, and for our conditions, it's really great. Here is estimation of the reserves. The highest percent and probability of 99 is taken from the history of the exploration. It's about 5 liters, for example, per second, and based on the long-term abstractions. The next level of A reserves in accordance with the rule book is estimated the probability 85%. After that, 70% for B. You can see this.
Boban,
Yeah.
I have to remind you of the time limits.
Yeah. I will go briefly in this table because the project provide conditions to prescribe to explain the present project, but also to give this classification of potential future projects. Present project is classified as E1.1, F1.1, and G1, but there are also potential projects where the E axis is estimated as E2 based on the probability of the reserves. G axis are estimated as G1, G2, and G3, and so on. This is the first example of the mapping scheme. I discussed this with colleague Vukas from Serbia, and in the first 3 rows you have the official national classification, potential new classification, what is most close to CRISCO classification, and after that UNFC. And on the bottom picture you can find just national classification and UNFC. Same things is prepared for the groundwater. And this mapping scheme will be probably a start point for the negotiation with the experts and the legal policy makers in the future about the application of the UNFC in national legal policy. Also, there are some touched development goals, like good health and well-being, clear water, affordable energy, sustainable cities and communities, climate actions. And last slide about recommendation for the future actions here from the plan which present Oleg at in his presentation. I find that he also touched some things like inclusion of small countries like Bosnia and Herzegovina in process of the bridging of the national classification with UNFC. Maybe consider a regional approach, because the countries like Bosnia, Serbia, Montenegro, Macedonia, and other former Yugoslav countries more or less have same principle of the classification on mineral resources based on the former Russian. And these regional trainings and national trainings will be crucial for the national decision makers and policy makers to seriously consider this classification as one very important for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jolovic. A very interesting presentation and very good case study. Also, very concrete examples of application of UNFC in Republic of Srpska in Bosnia and Herzegovina. I would now give the floor to Mr. Georgi Freiman from Kazakhstan. He is the chairman of the Executive Committee of Public Association.
Sorry, I like Radoslav Ukas.
Oh, sorry. That's my bad. I missed Radoslav. We go, yeah, I was thinking of doing it in alphabetical order. My apologies. The next speaker will be Radoslav Vukas, UNECE consultant from Serbia. He will speak on integrated energy with specifically coal and water resources, groundwater management in Serbia, and use of UNFC. Radoslav, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Oleg. Dear colleague, good morning, everyone. In front of you, I show some results of case study integrated energy and water resources management in Serbia to using UNFC system. In this picture, I show some one project called Basin. This is yellow part of central part of Serbia, maybe about southwest from Belgrade, capital town of Serbia, called Basin, where is situated Tamnava West field coal deposit or open pit. And the other project subject of this case study is Zlatibor Mountain, blue color in the south part of Belgrade, maybe about 300 kilometers. The first project, energy resource or coal deposit Tamna West field, the first time in the Serbia we concrete implemented social economic data or A-axis UNFC in national system. In this slide, you know about category ABC geology reserves or balance reserves, and the balance reserve ABC category of the coal deposits in national system corresponded in E1 UNFC system. Outbalance corresponded to E2 system of UNFC system definition, because in this moment we need some future technical prepared documentation or other necessary documentation prepared from this category to change to balance reserves. Other F-axis feasibility, if we talk about balance reserves ABC category in F1 UNFC system, because coal basin is more than decades from mining activities, which prepare many studies, many documents, many permits, and everything is approved. But outbalance ABC category in this moment is in F2 in UNFC definition, because this is technical documentation must subject to further evaluation further. And G-axis. Many times we talk about ABC category, like in the preview presentation, because we used the old rule book from ex-Yugoslavia, and in this moment, G-axis only balance category A plus B is G1 category, but balance C category is G2 category, because some difference level of confidence ABC category. In this moment, balance C1 category must be G1 because is maybe a low or moderate level of confidence by low regulation. And finally, in the Kolpanava West field, in this moment, I show some graphic presentation of this coal deposits with A, B, C category in the class of UNFC system, and some status of this project. This project several decades in exploitation field, but this is no renewable energy resource. This is hard mineral raw materials, and I think in next 5 years maybe some finished exploitation in this field or open pit. Second subject project, water resource or groundwater in the mountain Zlatibor area. When we processed this data about some project with different type of hydro potential, some drill hole on some springs and different type. We talk about A-axis only about state permit and other documents. In this case, ABC category of groundwater project correspondent to E1, but for project Kraljeva Voda, King Waters water, and the other case, ABC category correspondent with A11, because in this moment, for this project we haven't not have all permits all because management of energy and water resources is complex process and is distributed in the several ministry or sectors. This is very hardly for some implementation our system in a national system, UNFC system on other system, because maybe in the case when we talk about water, only data about the quantity we have in one ministry, maybe some mining and energy, other environmental protection and agriculture and other ministries, we have maybe some need to approve to some permit for exploitation by law. It's a problem. F-axis of category UNFC definition, ABC category national system, groundwater project, Kraljeva Voda or King Spring, ABC category correspondent to F1, but ABC category other subject project, some drill hole correspondent to F11, because in this moment owner haven't all permit for legal exploitation in this water. And when we explain about that in the case study, very detailed. And Mountain Zlatibor area and groundwater project in UNFC system. I show some map with some springs in the Mountain Zlatibor. This is a touristic center and some need some fresh water, some other water from maybe thermal water and the thermal plant. And this groundwater project total I show in this table with about results from sold and using in this case. What is valuable project, and this project in exactly assessment. And finally, some conclusion about short presentation, because very detailed data of this case study you must see in the case study link, that some must talk maybe several phrases about that, that Serbia has huge geological mining potential, but good geology tradition, mining activities, but some legal law regulation distributed as different ministries. It's a problem maybe in this moment, because we haven't any decision about use the UNFC system or other system. In this moment, we prepare some law amendment and of law on mining and geology exploration in Serbia. I think they start next this month, and this case study prepare in the actual pandemic COVID-19 pandemic, and if you assessment about that impact to this project, it's a high level of impact in A-axis and some lesser impact on F-axis in this subject project, in this case study. And finally, thank you very much for your attention, and большое спасибо для внимания.
Thank you, Radoslav. Thank you very much, and thank you also for keeping the time. We are a little bit behind, so we will not go for any questions at the moment. And now, with my apologies, we will go to Mr. Georgi Freiman, who is the chairman of the Executive Committee, Public Association of Independent Subsoil Experts of Kazakhstan. Georgi will present the case study on the application of UNFC in energy and water resources in Kazakhstan. Georgi, the floor is yours.
Hello, dear colleague. I want to tell you about the main results of the pilot project case study of the application of UNFC in energy and water resources in Kazakhstan. Please, next slide. The system for assessing resources and mineral reserves in force in Kazakhstan. In Kazakhstan, for the classification of reserves and resources of solid minerals, energy, raw materials, and groundwater, the GKZ state local system operates. Also, since 2018, in Kazakhstan, the code KazRC, developed in accordance with the Krynska template, has been operating in parallel.
Georgi, you are muted. Can you unmute and speak? You became muted.
Sorry?
Yeah, you
Yes,
became
okay.
muted. Yeah.
Yes. On this slide, we see approximate ratio of resources and reserves according to Krynska template, UNFC, and GKZ, Republic of Kazakhstan. On the left part, we see Krynska template, mineral reserves proved probably, who corresponds with UNFC categories as E1, F1, G1 and 2, and UNFC class viable project. For GKZ RK, these categories as A, B, B and C1. The mineral resources of Krynska measured, indicated, and inferred as corresponds UNFC categories as E2, F2, G1, G2, G3, and UNFC class potential viable projects. And of GKZ categories as B, C1, C1, C2. And on down this table, exploration results of Krynska as E3, F3, G4, and as UNFC class prospective projects of GKZ RK categories as C2 and prospective resources P1, P2, and P3. The most problem of GKZ is the fact that the categories B and C are equivalent to both for resources and reserves, according to Krynska. Please, next slide, Harry. Object of the case study. In accordance with the objectives of the projects, the South Inkai uranium deposits of the roll front type located in South Kazakhstan, and the groundwater deposits combined with it in the subsoil the explored area for water supply to the Taikonir village and production facilities of the South Inkai mine were taken as the object of research. In the area of the uranium deposit, no source of surface water suitable for use has been found. Therefore, groundwater is the only source of water supply. Please, next slide. Uranium resources of Kazakhstan. Base characteristics. The total identified uranium resources responsibly used and inferred as of 1st January 2017 amounted to 10.65 million tons of uranium metal. Kazakhstan ranks second in reserves, 1.7 million tons after Australia, and first in production, about 40,000 tons. This situation is ensured thanks to the unique uranium ore province, which is located in South Kazakhstan. The deposits in which are of the roll front deposits, which are processed by the in situ leach methods. Please, second slide. Water resources of Kazakhstan. The total resources of is estimated at an average of 100.8 cubic kilometers a year, of which 56.8 cubic kilometers are found in Kazakhstan, and 14.3.9 cubic kilometers come from adjacent territories. The provision of local surface water resources per inhabitant is very low. Only 3.2 thousand cubic meters a year. For comparison, in Russia, there are 27.8 thousand cubic meters a year per one inhabitant, and Kyrgyzstan 12.7 thousand cubic meters a year. With a large deficit of surface water, the total groundwater resources are 64.3 cubic kilometer a year and 14.4 cubic kilometer a year, and them are fresh water. Groundwater, which is essential, is under-utilized. That it is quite obvious that it is the widespread use of groundwater that can guarantee all the countries' need for water resources. Please, second slide. The urgency of the problem. For the semi-desert South Kazakhstan, on the territory of which UNECE uranium province is located, where dozens of mines operate, the issue of water supply is very urgent. This example shows the effective use of groundwater with is widespread in the subsoil together with uranium mineralization to supply fresh water to the population of the village and mine personnel, and process water to the production process of the South Inkai mine. Please, next slide. South Inkai uranium deposits. Uranium resources and reserves of the South Inkai deposit were estimated in 2018 in accordance with the NI 43.1.101 for submission of the Toronto Stock Exchange. Report CSA Global PTI Ltd 2018 for Uranium One Incorporated. The assessment of groundwater reserves was carried out in accordance with the requirements of the State Reserves Committee of the Kazakhstan. Please, second slide. South Inkai mineral resources and mineral reserves, Krynska and UNFC categories correlation. On the left, we see categories of Krynska and category UNFC. Resources estimated, measured, indicated, inferred, and the reserves proven and probably. Of category UNFC, E2 F2G1, E2 F2G2, and E3 F2G3.
Georgi, I'm sorry for interrupting you. Would it be possible for you to finish in about 2 minutes? We are late.
Yes, yes,
Thank you.
yes,
Thank you.
thank you. Conversion of mineral resources and mineral reserves according to the NI 43-101 standard into the UNFC was made on the basic on the bridging document between KRISKA and the UNFC. Please, next slide. We see on this slides summary of resources of the groundwater by categories according to the GKZ standard. Please, second slide. Classification of groundwater southern Kai deposits in accordance with UNFC 2019. Two classes, viable project and potentially viable projects, and the amount we see in the right list table. Please, second slide. Social, environmental, economic viability and impact assessment. The long-term profitable mining and processing of uranium or the southern Kai deposits, as well as the strategic plan calculated until 2045 to continue the profitable operation of the enterprise. Festivals to the economic and socio-ecological viability of the project. When mining and processing radioactive uranium ores, environmental safety issues are the particular importance. For this reason, government and subsoil use pay great attention to the environment and safety of production and health protection of the production personnel in the local population. In accordance with the environmental and water codes of Kazakhstan, before the start of the development of the southern Kite field, all necessary studies were carried out. Please, next slide.
Dear Georgi, we need to finish. 1 more minute and that's it, please.
Sorry. Next slide, please. An important task of the development of the mineral resources complex of Kazakhstan is to increase the resource base of solid minerals and hydrocarbons. UNFC can create the most favorable condition for investors. A limitation in the use of the UNFC include the need for significant adjustment of national legislation for both in Kazakhstan and in other countries. And this process, as you know, always happens very slow. The legal provision existing in Kazakhstan today enshrined in the Constitution of the Republic of Kazakhstan speak of the ownership of minerals described as the property of the people. Therefore, for implementation of the UNFC, it is also necessary of developing mechanisms of state control in this area. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Georgi. My apologies to you for having to limit the time available, but we are constrained by time, and my apologies. I also see there are quite a few very interesting questions, in the chat. Maybe our presenters, our speakers, could see if they can respond to some of them in the chat, because we may not have time for question and answer session, discussion after this session, again, because of the time limits. Now, the next speaker is a colleague from Kyrgyzstan, Mr. Arkady Rogalsky. He is the executive director of the Kyrgyz Society of Subsoil Experts, and he will speak about the application of UNFC to energy and mineral resources in Kyrgyzstan. Arkady, the floor is yours.
Hello, thank you very much for making this presentation. First of all, I want to thank Mr. Boban. It was very interesting and useful presentation, and I think that questions which were raised in this in his presentation is very valuable for us. We need to build something bridging document, not between Krilsko and UNFC, but maybe between JKZ systems of the former Soviet Union and to UNFC, because it will be easier for everybody to work with this. With this. And about Kyrgyzstan, first of all, I want to explain you that Kyrgyzstan is a small country, small mountainous country, which is situated in the middle of the Central Asia. It is absolutely landlocked by 4 different countries, and about 70% of the whole territory is high mountains with the limited of any kind of household activities. In the Kyrgyzstan, we have about 10,000 different mineral occurrences, of which only 2,000 which can be estimated as fields or any kind of which can make any kind of commercial effects. But if mining is not so big, but it's get about 22% of whole global domestic products. It makes 37% of direct foreign investments and 55% of total industry. But if we include in mining production of the metals and refraction of the metals, it makes about 80% of the whole global domestic product is just only mining and around areas. The biggest problem in the Kyrgyzstan in the mining is investments. And this slide, I want to show you a comparison of investments of different countries where mining is the same of the high level. And you see that Kyrgyzstan exploration coverage, it looks like high. It's about $325 per square kilometers. But it's become lower and lower from year to year. To improve the situation, currently in Kyrgyzstan, we try to make positive investment climate, minimization of negative impact of locals and environmental, and to attract foreign investments. To do this, we have 4 problems. First of all, it's state reserve balance, which based on the Soviet Union GGG system, which have some limits of it to attract the investments. That's why we decided to build a KYC standard based on Krilsko template, which has a bridging document with UNFC, based on which we plan to make more investment attractive country. Second problem is bureaucracy, which we plan to solve building mining code. First talks about mining code in Kyrgyzstan starts 2020. It's so already for 9 years. We have only talks about this, and currently we are in active stage of creating mining code. And it looks like that in the 2 months, it already will be presented for the everybody who are interested in the mining code. Third question is market of subsoil rights, because in Kyrgyzstan we have a very liberated market of subsoil rights, which sometimes not affect to positive government to make any kind of positive for the government, because licenses are holding for the Yes, without any activities. We decided to include stock exchange based on currency standard, which can help companies to attract investment using different mechanisms, not only simple shares and options and IPOs, but using blockchains, maybe using some crowdfunding and other related issues. Fourth question is mining policy procedures. First of all, what we need to do in this stage is support of existing companies. We need to make all our best to show companies who are already active in Kyrgyzstan that they can be active again. 5 questions: recultivation. Currently is the responsibility of the companies, but companies as usual don't like to do it. That's why we want to make that local authorities will be responsible for this. We build a special financing instruments called recultivation bank accounts, which owned by local authorities, but which cannot be used. Which can be used by local authorities only after the company abandoned the license and gone away. And only this, in this case, local authorities starting recultivation procedures according to their needs. And the fourth question is illegal mining. First of all, it's for the small, medium, and artisanal gold miners. We want to build facilitation of mining procedures for them using online schemes of providing the licenses and to make them easy to work. Currently, this project is already active for raw materials. So small and medium companies can receive raw materials licenses, but not online currently, but using local authorities administrations. In future, in 2 months, they will already do it using online instruments. On this slide, I want to explain you what the difference between GGZKR and Kyrgyzstan and UNRMS, but I think that previous presenters do it much better. And the next step, which we are very interested to work with the UNRMS in Kyrgyzstan, is about anti-uranium hysteria. Because in the end of the 2019, it was adopted anti-uranium law in the Kyrgyz Republic. Using this law, all kinds of exploration, production, processing, and other related to uranium or radioactive materials in Kyrgyzstan become illegal. So nobody can work anymore with the uranium and any kind of radioactive materials. Professional sector of the Kyrgyzstan, of the Geological Society, make all their best to explain to the decision makers that this is very destroying document of the Kyrgyzstan, because uranium is everywhere in the Kyrgyzstan. And currently we have built the pool of the beneficiaries who are interested to start exploration, production, processing of uranium in Kyrgyzstan again. And I've presented them UNRMS and the application about the role of the clear energy and sustainable development, the 2 United Nations documents. And it looks like that after adopting mining code, we try to make case study just about uranium in Kyrgyzstan. And maybe we can do this study ourselves, maybe with some comments and advice and support from the UNECE to change position of decision makers and first of all local activists. I think that we have very little time. That's why I want to thank you for your attention. And if you have any questions, I will easily. I can answer questions. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you very much, Arkady. There was a very good presentation, and thank you for keeping the time limits. We are short on time. With the questions and answers, again, I would like to suggest to our speakers, please look at the chat. And if you see a question that is directed to you, try to respond in writing in the chat. Thank you. I would also like to mention that we had a case study on the application of UNFC to energy and water resources of Kyrgyzstan, developed by the national consultant from Kyrgyzstan, Ms. Zinaida Shabalotova. She is unfortunately not available today for this session, but I encourage you to go to our website and look at the case study. Thank you, and I would like to thank Zinaida for her work. The next presentation, still under this part of the session, will be by Mr. Ray Pilcher. He is the president of Raven Ridge Resources, and he's also the chair of another UNECE group of experts on coal mine methane, and he is also our champion of just transition. He will speak about mine site restoration, environmental legacies, and land repurposing. And I believe water management will also be part of his presentation. Ray, the floor is yours. And again, you have 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Oleg. And thanks to everyone else in for this opportunity to speak. I really enjoyed the previous speakers' presentations, and yes, indeed, I will talk a little bit about water management as well. Next slide, please. When we look at coal production and consumption by region, this is work that's been done by the International Energy Agency. We see the coal mining in the OECD countries are generally declining. Coal mining and use are growing in the Asia Pacific, and that mines that close must undergo environmental restoration and mine land repurposing if we really want to look at the opportunity for sustainable development and resource management. We have to address all of these issues. Next slide, please. Because I'm chair of the group of experts on coal mine methane, I would be remiss without talking a little bit about methane, but we won't talk very much. Coal mining is responsible for approximately 9% of the anthropogenic methane that's released annually on this planet. Uneven methane emissions reporting from the coal sector is an ongoing problem in the UNECE region. We see everything from tier 1 to tier 3 estimates of methane emissions. But as I say, this is uneven, and there's a need for tightening up the reporting that's being done on a yearly basis for the inventories. And of course, this impacts the NDCs that each country is required under the Paris Accord to develop. More reliable information is developing, we hope, and it's really important to have these developed, because this is required if we're going to determine what the funding requirements are for a just transition. Next slide, please. Work that was done in 2019, led by my colleagues at Pacific Northwest National Laboratories in the United States, and some of the rest of us from private sector and other organizations, and sponsored by the US EPA, showed that actually we have a looming problem. As we close coal mines through their life cycle, we actually end up in areas where there are gassy coal mines, yielding not a gassy active mine any longer, but a coal mine that's closed, but will leak methane to the environment, really regardless of what we do, because underground mining in particular fractures the subsurface, causes subsidence, connects with man-made conduits as well as naturally existing conduits. And essentially you have a leaky system that until the mine is flooded, if it floods, there will be continued abandoned mine methane emissions. The EGRM has initiated work on coal-associated gas resources classification. This is in its beginning stages. It's very important for us to address because we also not only have to look at this as a resource, we have to be aware that methane is a very serious climate pollutant. And so those resources that aren't actively being used must be recognized as something that's very serious and something that has to be addressed. Next slide, please. When we talk about other legacies associated with deep underground mining, we'd be remiss if we don't talk about water issues. And certainly you saw in the previous discussions that it's not just coal mining. When we look at the discussion related to uranium mining, we see that there's also a need to be considering what the impact will be on water problems, and management of that is very, very important if we're going to look forward to sustainable development, but also a just transition as these mines are closed and land is repurposed and there are other opportunities developed for the workforce in the local communities. France and Germany have some serious water problems that are legacies from decades of mining in the Ruhr and Lorraine-Saar coal regions. Some of the mining in these areas go back at least 150 years, and in some cases even further back than that. I think Germany is engaged in battling sort of a world-class water incursion in the Ruhr coal mines. The last coal mine in the Ruhr area was closed in 2018, but water that flows from the mine workings threatened to contaminate the surface water and the aquifers overlying the deep mines in the region. This is one of these push and pull kind of problems. Certainly, as the groundwater starts to rebound after decades of mine activity, which included a lot of aggressive pumping to keep the mines dry, the water is rising in the shaft. This water has been in contamination or been contaminated by contact with these open workings. And so we have water that may be saline in its natural state from those lower lying sources of water resources, but it also is bringing up other unwanted contaminants. At the same time, because these areas also experience, thankfully, a lot of water that atmospheric water in the form of rain and snow. So you have water that's moving up from the deep underground and water that comes down from the surface. And so there are sort of parallel water pumping systems, some of which pump the rising mine water down so that it doesn't come up and become in contact with aquifers, and then pumping water out of the mines that flow in from the surface, because these are subsided areas, actually uphill into rivers to be disposed of. In fact, some of these pumping systems are so large, they're moving about 40,000 liters per second, which is an amazing number to consider if you think about it. Another amazing number to consider is that Germany calls these pumping costs eternity cost. I mean, I guess the rest of us that are geologists know that eternity is something different than what we normally talk about from the political and economic standpoint, but still, they're not going to be able to stop pumping. And there is about $1 billion a year being spent on this pumping. It's both financed by the Ruhr-Kohle a special purpose entity that was started to amass money and realizing that this is going to be an ongoing problem, and then amended by money from the budget from the government of Germany. France is also struggling with surface flooding from coal mines in the Lorraine-Saar region, and mining has left problems very similar to that in the Ruhr, area, but unfortunately it's progressing, and there's a new lake district forming on top of prime farmland. So we see something that is a very significant and unfortunate but real example of this nexus that we talk about between energy resource development, mine closures, and the food nexus, and you know, the other agricultural impacts. Next slide, please. Mine closure planning and funding for future environmental needs has to start when a mine opens. In fact, the mine should be open with the idea that they're going to be closed. Sustainable mine closures depend on coal, water, and methane resource management. I'm talking about coal mines here, but we just had a good example about uranium, which I'm quite familiar with. I started my career in uranium, and the ISL systems are very similar to those in South Texas in the United States. Mine restoration and mine land repurposing are crucial elements of resource management. But this happens after mines are closed, and of course, income has stopped. So you're left with sort of whatever has been set aside. Mine development plans should include these closure plans, and they should be reviewed periodically, because we all know that after you open a mine, you know, you have plans, but plans have to adapt to the reality of geology and other mining conditions. So these are important that we keep these updated and really look ahead at what we'll be facing at the end of life for these mines. Funding mechanisms for closing mines needs to be revisited. We've started to do some work related to what this deficit might look like. We already know that multilateral and commercial banks and management investment funds are quickly backing away from, in fact, many of them already have backed away from funding coal mine projects. This even includes not new coal mining, but cleaning up these problems. Surety bonding for mine.
Ray, apologies, I'm just reminding you of our time limits.
I have one more slide.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah. And surety bonding for mine closure and restoration are found to be woefully inadequate. And in many coal mining areas, there are environmental disasters looming that are already in crisis mode. This is a crisis mode in terms of losing mining jobs, which are high paying, and trying to find something to substitute for those. This means mine land repurposing. Next slide, please. Several groups, such as the Global Energy Monitoring Group, are tracking coal mining and its emissions, and they're also looking downstream to the power production and publishing reports to bring more attention to the use of addressing problems. The Global Sustainability Standards Boards are supporting drafting a set of standards which encourage transparency. These are related to the extractive industries that we've already spoken about, this oil, gas, and coal sectors. And then we're going to hear on Friday from the IFRS, which is focusing more on the financial reporting aspects of sustainability. And finally, but not least, the World Bank is working on global mine closure standards and mine land repurposing tools. This work promotes good practices and risk-based best principles for sustainable closure practices. I'm a part of that team, and we're integrating that with best practices that we explore in the coal mine methane group of experts. And those are my brief remarks. And so with that, I'll leave it. And last slide, please. Please feel free to contact Michael Drabek, who's the secretary of our group, or me directly. Thank you again very much, and I turn it back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ray. I believe I still have my role as a moderator.
Oh, sorry.
But no problem. Teresa can take it from me at any moment. And I see a very interesting comment from Teresa, actually, on what you just said. I would very much like to open a discussion on what we heard from our colleagues from Bosnia and Herzegovina, Serbia, Kazakhstan, and Kyrgyzstan, and from you, Ray, but I don't think we have time unless Harry lets me do it, but I don't think he will. So we now
maybe you can take 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Then I think there were, let me go to the chat and see what would be the most pressing questions. That was, let me go. I see questions from Ajoy Moitra. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly. While exploring groundwater, factors related to contamination like arsenic and fluoride, a global concern, are taken into account. Does the exploration take measures to segregate contaminated groundwater aquifers by aquifer mapping, or take measures to bring down contamination to a safe level? Would any of our presenters like to respond to this question?
Boban, you're
yeah, maybe I can share my experience with the groundwater and problem of fluoride, for the example. We have generally very good quality of drinking water in the country because it is mostly caustic water, but in some rural areas, there are some areas with fluoride in concentration more than 5 milligrams per liter. And it triggered very serious problems with the bones and the teeth and so other ills related with the fluoride concentration. But these days we have any measure to prevent it because it happens in the rural areas. It's more or less in the neighboring countries which share same geology like Bosnia, for the example. Yes, this issue of fluoride, from my point of view, it's very important, but not good addressed in many countries in the region. I prepare one study from one case study in Bosnia, and who is interested in this problematic about the fluoride contamination can send me a mail. I will be politely and send my working paper to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Boban. I think that's a very good response. I looked through the chat. Most of the messages there are comments congratulating our presenters with providing us with very good information, and I can only join them on that. So I think we can now go to the next part of the session. This is the work that we also have been doing last year and this year. It is directly related to the response to COVID-19. So this part of the session is called Micro, Small and Medium Enterprises and Resource Management in Response to COVID-19. And we have two speakers in this part of the session. The first one is Mr. Georgy Rudko, Chairman of the State Commission of Ukraine on Mineral Resources. And he will present the guidelines and best practices for MSMEs to assure resiliency and progress towards a circular economy in sustainable resource management and critical raw material supply chain solutions in Ukraine. Georgy, the floor is yours. And I would like to ask those of you who would like to listen to the English interpretation to switch to English in the appropriate box. It's at the bottom of the screen, and it says interpretation and has a globe. Georgy, слово вам. Спасибо.
Спасибо. Уважаемые дамы и господа, вам представляется доклад на тему методической рекомендации и оптимальные практики для малых, микро и средних предприятий с целью обеспечения устойчивости и прогресса на пути циркуляционной экономики в области устойчивого управления ресурсами и цепочек поставок критического сырья в Украине. Тема минеральных ресурсов глобальной экономики с учетом их естественной ограниченности приобретает стратегическое значение. Обеспеченность страны сырьем является фактором экономической безопасности, автономности и средством предупреждения глобальных кризисов. Современное общество все больше зависит от высокотехнологичных товаров, для которых характерно использование критических минералов. Кризис COVID-19 показал, насколько быстро и глубоко могут быть нарушены глобальные цепочки поставок. Учитывая ситуацию, которая сложилась в Украине и в мире на фоне пандемии COVID-19, нами было проведено исследование в сотрудничестве с Европейской экономической комиссией, которая является одним из партнеров, работающих над проектом УНДА, то есть глобальная инициатива по возрождению сектора ММСП после COVID-19. Методические рекомендации разработаны с учетом основных принципов РК ООН и СУР ООН для МСП и правительства Украины с целью обеспечения устойчивости и прогресса на пути к циркулярной экономике в области устойчивого управления ресурсами и цепочек поставок критического сырья. Малые и средние предприятия являются хребтом развитых экономик. Например, в ЕС малые предприятия составляют более 90% всех предприятий и обеспечивают значительное количество рабочих мест. От них также исходит основной импульс в рыночной экономике и с их инновационными устремлениями. Критерии определения понятия ММС различаются в зависимости от страны. Критерии разделения предприятий на микро, малые и средние в Украине показаны на слайде. Интерес к критическому сырью на глобальной экономике ввиду его естественной органичности приобретает ключевое значение. Параметры критичности могут быть разными. Это риск дефицита, экономическое значение, риск предложения, рост производства и динамика рынка. Учитывая методические принципы РК ООН и СУР ООН, перечень критического минерального сырья определялся по следующим параметрам. Социально-экономические факторы ось Е, технологические факторы ось F и геолого-промышленные факторы ось G. Рамочная классификация принята в Украине начиная с 1997 года на государственном уровне. В 1919 году Украина внедрила модификацию классификации, построенную на принципах РК ООН 2009. Классификация запасов и ресурсов полезных ископаемых Украины устанавливает единые для Государственного фонда недр принципы подсчета, геолого-экономической оценки, государственного отчета и отчетности об использовании запасов и ресурсов полезных ископаемых в соответствии с категориями РК ООН. Никель, кобальт, хром и молибден – это те минералы, которыми Украина обладает в значительном количестве, но для собственных нужд импортирует их в больших объемах. Разведные месторождения и родопроявления являются комплексными, сосредоточены в основном пределах украинского исторического счета. Помощь на них не ведется совсем или в очень незначительном количестве. В Украине размещены крупнейшие месторождения в Европе, объекты с разведными запасами или прогнозными ресурсами лития. Известны два разведные месторождения и 2 предварительно разведанные участки литиевых руд, а также ряд родопроявлений литиевой минерализации. Сегодня литий в Украине не добывается, а лицензия получена на одном месторождении. Тантал, небий, бериллий, цирконий и скандий – это редкие и редкоземельные металлы, которые обнаружены в комплексных месторождениях и родопроявлениях украинского кристаллического щита. Цирконий и скандий сосредоточены в рассыпях и коренных месторождениях в значительных объемах. Их добыча пока не ведется. Запасы тантала, необия, бериллия учитываются на 6 месторождениях. При этом добыча реализуется на Малышевском и Волчанском месторождениях. Украина входит в десятку ведущих стран мира по объемам разведанных запасов руд титана, обеспечивает более 6% их мировой добычи. Есть 27 месторождений и более 6 родопроявлений разной степени изученности. Основным титаносодержащим минералом является ильменит. Сейчас разрабатываются только рассыпные месторождения. Это около 10% от всех разведанных запасов. Остальные содержатся в коренных месторождениях. Риск поставок критически важного сырья для Украины показан на слайде. Уделяется низкая степень риска, средняя степень риска, высокая степень риска. В Украине есть производственные мощности в целом ряде секторов, используя их сырье, что в переработке дает возможность концентрирования критических для европейского сообщества материалов. Вторичные источники получения физического сырья показаны на слайде. Возможности ММСП получить доступ к международным рынкам являются проблематичными в связи с определенными торговыми барьерами. Это высокие на соблюдение затраты, на соблюдение требований стандартов, это государственная и коммерческая тайна и расходы на патентование, это значительные объемы минимальной товарной партии физического сырья, это вызовы логистики, включая таможенные требования. Эффективное управление цепочками поставок – один из решающих факторов сохранения повышения уровня доходов и конкурентоспособности на современных и будущих рынках. Отдельным вызовом для логистики стал карантин, начиная с марта 2020 года в связи с COVID-19, который продолжается и по сегодняшний день. Для отечественных предприятий внедрение концепции формирования устойчивых цепочек поставок является новой сферой. Но даже незначительное их количество уже реализовали практические шаги в этом направлении. Предприятиям нужно реагировать на текущие изменения и обеспечивать надлежащее распределение ресурсов для поддержки функционирования бизнеса. Рекомендации для микро, малых и средних предприятий в Украине следующие. Это безопасность сотрудников и непрерывное функционирование бизнеса. Это разработка новых стратегий сохранения непрерывности бизнеса. Это взаимодействие с заинтересованными лицами. Это выступления профессиональные или деловые ассоциации. Для улучшения доступа к финансам, это очень важно, следует реализовать изменения в законодательной базе относительно государственных гарантов, содействие программам финансового образования, ориентированным на спрос предпринимателей ММСП, использовать схемы кредитной гарантии как механизма распределения рисков усовершенствовать альтернативное небанковское и акционерное финансирование для ММСП. Это кредитные союзы, лизинговые компании, доверительные общества и инвестиционные фонды. Чтобы минимизировать риски малому и среднему бизнесу, необходимо отслеживать краткосрочную ликвидность, оценивать финансовые и операционные риски и быстро на них реагировать, создать резервный фонд, который может поддержать компанию на плаву от нескольких месяцев до года, отслеживать факторы, которые могут повлиять на потребителей, поставщиков, подрядчиков и партнеров, постоянно развивать и улучшать навыки сотрудников. Спасибо за внимание.
Спасибо большое, Георгий. Очень интересная презентация. И я, честно скажу, я просто рекомендую всем коллегам, всем участникам сегодняшнего заседания обратиться к, так сказать, первоисточнику, к тому исследованию, которое Георгий вместе со своими коллегами провел. Очень интересная информация, очень полезная в нынешних условиях, как для того сектора, в котором вы работаете, так и в целом очень интересные данные по Украине, которые могут быть, наверное, расширены для других стран, в целом по экономике в условиях коронавирусного кризиса и восстановления после него.
Большое спасибо, Олег.
Спасибо еще раз, Георгий. Сейчас следующий коллега, который будет выступать, коллега из Таджикистана, господин Рахманбек Багдавлатов, председатель Государственной комиссии Таджикистана по, я не уверен, я правильно перевожу или нет, по минеральным ресурсам или по минеральным резервам. Запасам. Минеральным запасам. Спасибо большое, Рахманбек. Тема та же, только в применении к Таджикистану. Рахманбек, вам слово.
Добрый день, уважаемый Хари, Олег, коллеги. Я вот послушал очень внимательно доклад моего предшественника, уважаемого Георгия Рудко. Я думаю, что это та же тема, и для нас она новая, но очень интересная. Мы здесь очень много работали, и сейчас я просто коротко расскажу вам о тех работах, которые мы проделали. Пожалуйста, следующий слайд. Next slide, yeah. Малый и средний бизнес дает возможность реализовать творческие способности личности, предприимчивость, инициативу и совершенство обеспечения общественных отношений. Проблемам малого и среднего бизнеса посвящены исследованию много ученых, экономистов. Тем не менее, ряд аспектов проблемы малого и среднего бизнеса в специфических условиях переходной экономики Таджикистана остаются недостаточно изученными. Это касается прежде всего особенностей его развития, формирования экономических механизмов, государственной поддержки, региональных различий в процессе формирования и развития этой сферы деятельности и так далее. Целенаправленная государственная поддержка малого и среднего бизнеса имеет исключительно важное значение для формирования рыночной экономики. Помощь государства действенна только тогда, когда она опирается на стройную систему последовательных мер поддержки малого и среднего бизнеса. Next слайд, пожалуйста. Правительство Республики Таджикистан и при участии всех партнеров по развитию инициировало проведение всесторонней оценки социально-экономических воздействий COVID-19 с целью содействия принятия обоснованных и целенаправленных ответных мер по восстановлению. Целью оценки было понимание текущего, среднесрочного и долгосрочного воздействия COVID-19 во всех регионах страны на жизнь и благосостояние населения Республики Таджикистан, а также на микро, малые и средние предприятия и неформальный сектор. Мировое сообщество отреагировало на гуманитарную помощь, льготными кредитами, грантами. Так, на поддержку экономики в условиях пандемии в мае Международный валютный фонд выделил Таджикистану $189 миллионов по механизму ускорения льготного кредитирования на 10 лет с 5-летним льготным периодом. Остаток задолженности за начало 2020 года перед фондом составлял около 30 миллионов долларов. Таджикистан также попал в число 25 стран мира, которым Международный валютный фонд облегчил выплату долгов за счет предоставления грантов на 2 года. Next slide. Микро, малые и средние предприятия являются основными движущими силами экономического развития почти во всех экономиках мира и по разным причинам особенно серьезно пострадали от пандемии. В большинстве случаев у ММСП не хватает финансовых средств для преодоления задержек с поставками сырья, вызванных нарушением или прерыванием цепочек поставок. Одна из основных проблем для этой компании – сохранить квалифицированных сотрудников. Другой проблемой является компенсация неплатежей из-за задержек и выполнения более долгосрочных контрактов на поставку из-за непоставки сырья. К наиболее распространенным негативным последствиям ММСП относятся неспособность фирм погасить задолженность по кредитам, платить налоги, производить товары или оказывать услуги в соответствии с уровнем существования до COVID-19, расширять масштабы коммерческой деятельности и выплачивать заработные платы работникам. Например, более 20% ММСП сообщили трудности с погашением кредитов, а 22,6% испытывают трудности с регулярной оплатой налогов, что указывает на низкую ликвидность МСП. Next slide, please. Вспышка COVID-19 привела к временным нарушениям в отношениях между МСП и покупателями, поставщиками, клиентами и рынками. В общей сложности 31,7% МСП, чьи цепочки поставок пострадали, заявили, что их производство было нарушено. Это означает, что офисы, мастерские и фабрики были закрыты с мая 2020 года. Также был ограничен доступ к ресурсам. У многих предприятий возникли серьезные логистические проблемы, что в свою очередь привело к ограничениям доступа к транспортным услугам внутри страны и в регионе. Кроме того, по понятным причинам были сорваны продажи в связи с временным закрытием местных базаров и рынков. Что касается производственных бытовых цепочек, 41,3% пострадавших ММСП сообщили о перерыве с отношениями с клиентами. Еще 16,6% сообщили об ограниченном доступе к местным рынкам, например, базарам, продуктовым магазинам и так далее. А 12,7% заявили, что они испытывают трудности с поиском и закупкой материалов у аффилированных поставщиков и продавцов по стране. Здесь можно еще отметить, что по пандемии, в периоде пандемии были закрыты все границы. То есть республика была как бы закрыта со всех сторон. И вот это тоже имело очень большое влияние на работу ММСП. Next slide, please. Значительная часть финансовой отрасли также можно найти положительно для себя сторону сегодняшнего развития событий. Макроэкономический прогноз на 2021 год Евразийский банк развития сообщает, что рост экономики Таджикистана составит 6,1%. Согласно прогнозу банка, в 2025 году рост экономики Таджикистана 6,1%, полное восстановление ВВП до кризисного уровня 4 квартала 2019 года произойдет лишь в Казахстане. То есть страны-участники, это наши партнеры будут. Участники ЕБР подвергнутся в 2020 году масштабным социальным и экономическим потрясениям из-за последствий пандемии COVID-19. Государственная поддержка экономики в Таджикистане относительно велика и составляет только 2,5% внутреннего валового продукта. Это опять-таки объясняется ограниченным фискальным резервом республики. По сравнению с 2019 годом, где рост экономики составил 7,5%, рост экономики Таджикистана составит 4,5%. В 2021 году экономика страны получит поддержку от денежных переводов трудовых мигрантов, так как будет восстанавливаться экономика государств-доноров, прежде всего России. То есть благодаря то, что мы очень хорошо работаем в период пандемии, сейчас границы открыты, уже есть поток трудовых мигрантов в России, в других странах, и мы думаем, что благодаря их денежных переводов мы можем считать на успех в развитии в этой стране. Next slide, please. Относительно редкоземельных элементов, ну вот на слайде все написано. В республике работает программа изучения и оценки запаса редких металлов 2016-2026 годы. Уже идут некоторые работы в стране, то есть программы проанализировали все это. И мы надеемся, что по редкоземельным элементам мы выделили порядка 16-17 площадей, где имеется возможность открыть новых месторождений в Таджикистане. Поэтому в этом направлении будет очень интересно, и мы поработаем. И где-то ближайшие, вот, до конца будем делать программы, возможно, будет у нас уже месторождение редкоземельных элементов, которые мы будем предлагать для уже разработки. Next slide, please. В краткосрочной перспективе масштаб поддержки ММСП со стороны правительства Таджикистана в значительной степени зависит от общего размера государственного бюджета, от инструментов денежно-кредитной, налогово-бюджетной политики, а также различных косвенных показателей, таких как ВВП на душу населения, являющихся ключевым фактором, определяющим способность правительства Таджикистана оказывать надлежащую поддержку бизнесу, не прибегая к внешней официальной помощи в целях развития. Здесь можно отметить один немаловажный факт, что сейчас в структурах республики разрабатывает налоговый кодекс, который будет облегчать намного, участь инвесторов, и в этом направлении идет очень много работы. При правильной политической реакции экономики Таджикистана, как ожидается, постепенно вернется в 2021-2022 годах. Этот сценарий предлагает наличие вакцины, укрепление региональной экономики, восстановление притока денежных переводов и международной торговли. Для обеспечения эффективности государственных финансов правительство обязалось консолидировать бюджет и обновило стратегию управления долгом на 2021-2023 годы, чтобы проработать критерии заимствований, потолки долга в среднесрочной перспективе. Next slide, please. Здесь я весь слайд вам не зачитаю, просто здесь хочу сказать, национальные международные учреждения являются большим подспорьем упрощения деловой практики и регистрации бизнеса ММСП. В краткосрочной перспективе во время пандемии небюрократические меры помощи, такие как упрощение правил импорта, могут значительно упростить положение ММСП. То есть очень много в этом направлении делается в республике, и я думаю, что в ближайшее время мы начнем уже хороший выход из пандемии. Дело в том, что в Таджикистане сейчас нету, как говорится, COVID-19, и мы работаем во всей развитой стране. Next slide, please. Я, используя площадку, где мы сейчас работаем, в Таджикистане, помимо того, что мы работаем по, наши предыдущие говорили, докладчик говорил, что работают по советской системе подсчета запасов. У нас тоже принята программа о переходе на международные системы подсчета запасов. Мы уже начинаем работать в этом направлении, готовим нормативно-правовые документы и потихонечку их адаптируем к международному стандарту. И, соответственно, мы работаем по таким программам, как макромайн используем в нашей и джорк уже на подходе с нашим партнером, мы собираемся их ввести в И я думаю, что переход на международный стандарт подсчет запасов намного убыстряет нашу работу и подготовит месторождение, тот или иной месторождение к разработке. Очень большие перспективы есть в Таджикистане относительно редкоземельных элементов. Об этом мы уже привели в нашем отчете подробную информацию. Я думаю, что отчет будет опубликован на сайте UNFC, и там можно подчеркнуть очень много информации. Если будут какие-то вопросы, если какие-то обсуждения, мы готовы к обсуждениям. Мы всегда рады, что работаем с нашими партнерами, с международными организациями. И таким способом мы хотим просто поднять уровень диалога в Таджикистане на более высокий, как бы, пик, мы можем сказать, потому что очень много было сделано в советское время для геологии Таджикистана. Потенциал, я еще повторяю, потенциал коренных месторождений Таджикистана очень большой. Дело в том, что 93% нашей территории занимают горы, и вот те месторождения, те проявления, которые открыты на территории республики, они еще находятся на разных стадиях развития, изучения, и где-то в ближайшее время мы при хорошей финансировании, нормальное привлечение инвестиций, мы можем просто поднять экономику Таджикистана на более высокий уровень. Большое спасибо.
Спасибо большое, Рахманбек. Очень интересная презентация. И действительно, мы в ближайшее время разместим на веб-сайте проекта, разместим ваше исследование на английском и русском языке. И мы будем рады, если коллеги, участники обратятся к нему и посмотрят ситуацию в Таджикистане и ваши выводы. Спасибо большое, Рахманбек.
Спасибо.
Unfortunately, we do not have time for questions and answers. There was a question addressed to Georgi Rudko related to photovoltaic waste and the role of MSMEs in Ukraine in its recycling and processing. Georgi did respond to it. So if you're interested, please take a look in the chat. He says that there are some small companies, but the amounts processed and recycled are very small. I now give the moderator baton back to Teresa. Teresa, I hope I didn't encroach too much on your authority. I really enjoyed moderating this session. Very interesting, very informative. Teresa, please. Thank you.
So, Oleg, thank you. It was a pleasure to share the moderation with you. No problem. So now I would, before introducing our keynote speaker, I would like to ask you all some patience because we need to take the session a little bit 20 or 25 minutes more as we are late, as you already noticed. So now it's my pleasure to introduce the keynote speaker, which will talk to us about climate change and the oil and gas industry, a transition to a zero carbon world. It is Robert Perrons from Queensland University. I must share with you that Rob has delivered a number of lectures to the expert group Resource Management, and we are delighted to welcome him back for this exciting keynote. Rob is currently a professor of technology management and strategy at Queensland University of Technology in Brisbane, Australia. Rob, the floor is yours, and thank you for coming.
Teresa, thank you very much. It's my absolute pleasure to be giving this keynote today. And I very much regret that I can't be in Geneva. Geneva is a city that never disappoints at any time. But at this time of year, I find it particularly beautiful. And it would take a global pandemic and the cessation of most international travel to keep me away from Geneva at this time of year. But unfortunately, that's exactly where we find ourselves. I want to talk to you today, as Teresa indicated, about climate change in the oil and gas industry. And there are basically two key parts that I want to draw your attention to here. First of all, is I'll put in front of you some confronting evidence that reminds us of the fact that even though we've heard a lot of exciting testimonial and there's a lot of great work that's happening that is going to help us on our journey in delivering on the promise of green and clean energy technologies, the transition is not happening as quickly as many of us were hoping it would. And a consequence of that is that we have to make sure that we're kind of doing our level best to try to think about carbon mitigation and carbon management also for the legacy energy assets that we have. So I'll be kind of investing the first half of the presentation talking about that. And I have great news for the second half, and that I will be giving what's basically tantamount to an update a status update on where are we with new digital technologies that show tremendous promise in aiding and abetting our attempts to help with managing climate change, specifically with the oil and gas industry. Harry, advance to the next slide, please. Just a tipping of my hat to some research collaborators that I've been working with. A lot of the ideas and the themes that I'll be talking about here, even though I'm the one doing the talking today, these are based on many discussions that I've had with folks from the Intel Corporation and also from PwC, the global consulting company. Next slide, Harry. So basically, kind of let's talk about, here's a snapshot of what the energy mix of the world looks like more or less these days. This is this data that I'm presenting here is from as recently as a year ago. And among the things that we should be very pleased with, if we look on the right-hand side of this figure here, is that we see that the share of the overall energy mix that comes from renewables, we see that climbing very aggressively, very quickly. That's that orange line at the bottom of the right-hand side of the figure here. And that's what we were all hoping for. Now, but there's also some other news that we need to get on the table here. And that is that when we kind of look at how the other energy sources, the legacy ones, the ones that for decades we have relied on, like oil, like gas, we see that even though proportionally oil has kind of dropped in terms of what fraction of the overall energy mix comes from oil, we still see that in absolute exajoules delivered to the market. That's that green wedge on the left-hand side. We see that the absolute amount of oil delivered into the marketplace has not only, it's not level, it's still increasing. And natural gas is growing even faster than that. So there can be little doubt that oil and gas are going to be with us for at least the short to medium term future. Harry, next slide. And that is kind of crystallized into the following sound bites that we see from the International Energy Agency's most recent energy outlook. Yes, of course, they're very excited about the rise of solar and wind, et cetera. I don't think anyone is discouraging the arrival and the proliferation of these technologies, but the emerging consensus is that it's a little bit too soon to be talking about the absolute demise or the snuffing out of oil. It's going to be with us for quite some time yet, and that is even more true for natural gas, which is considered by many to be a transition fuel as we move to green and clean tech. Next slide, Harry. And that basically brings about a logical consequence of those things is this, that if we want to have a serious conversation about carbon mitigation, about achieving our climate goals, then those goals are not going to be at all within our reach if we're not also, in tandem to the new technology discussion, we also must be discussing the existing infrastructure, the legacy energy system that we have, that we've had for many decades. We're going to have to address how are we going to work towards carbon mitigation with those as well. Next slide. Okay, so let's just talk about what that energy, that legacy system looks like. And it also kind of puts into focus for us what is the size of the prize that we're talking about here. So this figure that I'm showing here, this is kind of the overall snapshot of where the global emissions come from or came from as recently as 2015. And basically what you see here kind of in that dark blue part towards the top of the figure is that this is the total greenhouse gas emission contribution that comes from the oil and gas sector. Now, the northeast part of that, the 33%, that comes from the using of fossil fuels, the using of oil and gas, the burning of them to create energy. Okay, now that's kind of to supplant that, to replace that or minimize it, that's going to be left in the hands of the people who consume these products. Okay, so that's really not what I'm focusing on here. What I do want to draw your attention to here is in the northwest corner, we've got that 8 and the 1, which adds up to 9, of course. So 9% of all the global greenhouse gas emissions come directly from the oil and gas industry. That is to say, this is the levers that they pull, this is the buttons that they push. So the oil and gas industry can directly control that 9%. And that's the 9% that I'm zooming in on with this talk. Next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit about the breakdown of exactly where these greenhouse gas contributions come from. When we kind of look at the spectrum, the soup to nuts breakdown of all of the different ways that greenhouse gases are emitted into the atmosphere, we see there's a bit of a mix here. We see CO2 at various parts of the process. CO2 is spat into the air. We see activities like flaring. We see here hydrogen production downstream, but there's this one very conspicuous baby blue chunk here that's 47%, almost half of the entire life cycle greenhouse gas emissions comes from this one curious section here called fugitive emissions or venting of methane. And I'd like to kind of talk a little bit about why that particular category is as big as it is. Next slide. That can be explained with two things here. First of all, we have to remember that a ton of emitted gas is not the same whether it's methane or CO2. The truth of the matter is that methane is at least 28 times more potent as a greenhouse gas than is carbon dioxide. 28 at a minimum, and there are estimates that it can be even more potent than that. So that's why it has this very outsized role, this outsized presence in when we kind of consider together all of the greenhouse gas emissions. Methane really stands out as a huge part of that problem. And I've also got, towards the top of the figure here, I've also got a recent headline from only a few weeks ago from the Financial Times of London, telling us that the methane pollution is starting to soar. In this particular article, they were talking about the US with shale drilling, but I want to emphasize that just because that particular story was about the US, this is not isolated to the US. This is very much a global thing. But what I do want to draw your attention to there is that that the methane pollution levels are actually on the rise as the energy production has kind of bounced back in the post-COVID era, where we're turning the corner so that COVID's a little more behind us than it was. As the energy production is increasing, we are seeing that there is this significant growth in the amount of the methane that is being released into the atmosphere. And so that outsized chunk of the entire life cycle greenhouse gas emissions that the oil and gas industry was creating, it's in recent history, it's actually got a little bit worse. And this kind of emphasizes something that we already knew, that we already knew we had to be focusing on it. We had to be managing this. And what this shows us is that we have to do even better than that. We have to get very concerned about this because recently it got a little bit worse. Next slide. So basically, I've got this, the title of this slide talks about the other challenge. So we know what the challenge is. We know that in the long term, in the big picture, what we need to do is to take the global economy, take our resource system, and kind of move things to a place where green and clean tech is ubiquitous and everywhere. And I think we all get it. We all understand that that's the challenge. But the other challenge is while we are moving to that utopian future, we also have to be managing the legacy assets that we have. And just because of how slow it's taking us to turn this corner, we're going to have to, if we're going to have any serious shot at making things okay with our overall carbon mitigation strategy, we're going to have to devote significant time and energy and resources to managing the CO2 and methane outputs of the oil and gas industry. And so the question then is, what technologies most specifically digital technologies. What can we bring to bear that will help us to achieve that? Next slide, please. Now, the great news here is that I think some of the heavy lifting is already done. We can significantly piggyback on some of the new design principles and approaches to engineering that have been unfolding in the oil and gas industry for the last few decades. The oil and gas sector has been working towards this concept of smart fields, and it kind of happened in fits and starts, and in with slightly different nomenclature and different oil and gas companies around the world. But there was basically this idea took root of smart fields, or I worked for Shell for many years. And so we called it smart fields there. It was called iFields at Chevron, digital oil field of the future at BP, et cetera. So this is, even though I'm kind of applying, I suppose, more Shell-friendly terminology there, it was a concept that most oil and gas companies grabbed onto. And so basically, we've kind of seen that this digital smart fields technology, these design principles and this philosophy, that this has been kind of getting absorbed throughout the industry for the last 20 years or so. So like I said, a lot of the heavy lifting is already done now, but here's where things are going to be a little bit different. Historically, the real motives, if we could be completely honest with ourselves about what was driving the absorption of this design change in the oil and gas sector, it was really driven by the pursuit of operational efficiencies and cost savings, and delivering more barrels and making those barrels happen faster, cheaper, et cetera. Now, we can take those design philosophies, however, and we can kind of repurpose them so that we can kind of focus more on emissions and being greener. Next slide, please. One of the other big technological shifts that we see happening is that there's this this impressive shift towards the Internet of Things, okay? And one of the things that's driving that in the marketplace is we're seeing a precipitous decline in the price of sensor technology. Now, basically what that allows us to do is put our finger on the pulse of the patient and kind of build a bridge between the physical world and the digital world. And so we can kind of measure whatever technical parameter we wanted to keep our eye on. What's the flow rate over there? What's the temperature over there? What's the pressure in that manifold? We can basically pick whatever technical parameter we want to measure at any point in the system. And for what is a reasonable and very affordable amount of money, we can now measure it, and we can record that data and share it with any stakeholder that might care about it. And what this does for us is it gives us a much greater degree of enterprise-wide visibility and transparency so that everybody in the system is able to basically look at what is happening at any point in the technical system that we're talking about. Next slide, please. Another big important development that I'm excited to tell you about today is that we're seeing more and better penetration of edge computing. Now, let me just kind of explain what I mean by edge computing. This is basically we're kind of moving the computation functions to the edge of the network, that is to say, closer to where the data is being collected. If we kind of think about the smart fields paradigm or the intelligent oil fields paradigm that we've been developing over the last couple of decades, really a lot of that was about collecting data at the wellhead or wherever the production was happening. And then the data would usually get sent to some cloud type of environment, and then calculations would happen, and then the results of those calculations would eventually find their way back to the operational area where this stuff was happening. And then we were there was always this latency or this lag, this time lag between when an event happened and when we got feedback on that event. Now, the bad news there is that sometimes this meant that we were not able to optimize in what would be a helpful time frame, or we couldn't optimize in real time. And that would prevent us sometimes from being on top of situations where we could have stopped an emission from happening. But with edge computing, it helps us to reduce that latency. it gets rid of a lot of that time lag. And why that is extremely beneficial in this context is it means that the system overall will be much better at reacting much sooner to emission type of situations. So instead of just finding out after the fact, geez, we really should have been on top of that. We could have managed it differently here and here. If only we had that information at the time. Now we have that information, the calculations that we need to make that more informed choice, that's right in your hand, right out of the blocks. And also by having the calculations happening where the production is happening, it also makes the whole thing simpler to audit. Next slide, Harry. And that brings me to this. We've seen over the last couple of years the emergence of a global data standard called the Open Footprint Forum. Just a few words about what that's about. What this allows us to do is it's basically a framework for sharing information, a protocol, if you will. It's an architecture for how we think and talk about and categorize emissions. And it was kind of originally designed for all kinds of industries, but it's been specifically absorbed and is being used extensively by the oil and gas sector. Many international oil companies, many national oil companies, most service companies, and lots of digital vendors have all piled in. And so this has kind of become, I think it's fair to say, this is kind of the standard for this. And what this allows us to do now is have a shared language within the entire industry and a framework for being able to share data, and companies can work together to make sure that, again, soup to nuts, that we are able to kind of let the data flow throughout the entire value network from one company to the next, and make sure that we are able to measure very accurately and very carefully exactly where emissions are happening. And it's by having that greater degree of transparency and visibility, that's how we're going to manage this better in the future. Next slide. I think I'm just about out of time. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to share these ideas with you and to bring you up to speed with some of these technological developments. It's been my absolute pleasure. If you have any questions, I'll do my level best to answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Robert, for your very, very interesting presentation and enlightening us in our work and putting very interesting questions. I don't know if, Harry, could you help me? Do you have any time for questions? Harry?
Harry, you're muted.
Hi, Teresa, it's Charlotte. I think we've got time for a few questions from the chat.
Okay.
So there was
yes.
Yeah. Okay. There's a good questions and comments about the higher global warming potentials for methane. I think Ray Pilcher shared some comments there.
Yes, maybe Robert, if you could see the questions, or do you want me to read them?
Okay, I see that we've got one question about higher GWPs for methane are related to the time horizon used. We should use the 20-year time horizon to more accurately portray methane's impact. So again, I offered, I don't know exactly if you think that should be revising the potency of methane, if that should be revising it up or down. What I did present in the presentation there was I said it was a range. I believe I said it was between, basically based on a few sources that I put forward there, it was between 28 and 80 times the greenhouse gas potency of CO2. So what I'm not clear from Ray's question in the chat room is whether they're arguing that it should be turned up a notch or turned down a notch. But what is manifestly obvious by the fact that I put forward a range is that there is certainly room for some disagreement about exactly what that multiplier is.
May I respond to that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, well, thank you, Professor Perrins. That was a great presentation. My point is that because we're involved in methane emissions reductions, that when you look at the 20-year time horizon, the average on that 20 years is 84. And when at the moment it's released, it's 120 times that of CO2. So, and it only lasts in the atmosphere for about 12 years. At that point, there's like way less than 1% of the original pulse left. So we really need to be taking advantage of that in terms of both our understanding of its impact, but also the potential for leveraging that to make quick gains. And of course, the oil and gas industry recognizes this, the coal industry not so much, and then other sources of methane even less. So anyway, that was my point, not to be critical, just to say that's where we probably should be heading. Thank
Absolutely. You. And Ray, I don't at all object to people kind of adding on a very important and materially relevant bits of the science as we go through this. It's only by putting these bits of science together that we're going to crack the big nut.
Yes, thank you.
So I don't know if we have any more questions.
We don't seem to have any more questions. Yeah.
I would like to put a quick question, if possible. So, Robert, how you talked, you ended your presentation with the crucial need of standardization of data. That's what we feel, but the way to move to the standardization is very difficult. In your opinion, how could, in your expertise, how could you help us accelerate the push for this standardization?
Right. Well, thank you. That's a very good question. I think that what's happening in a scenario like that, and I'm kind of abstracting this to the level of talking about dominant designs that emerge in a marketplace, be it, computer operating systems, or, whether we're talking about Betamax versus VHS. So I'm kind of abstracting it to the level of the dominant design discussion. Now, typically what you're looking for is a scenario where many of the companies in that market ecosystem are kind of converged on a single solution. A tipping point can happen, and then everybody starts rallying around a particular technical solution because it's the language that everybody is speaking now. Think of, for example, when we had that rivalry between HD DVD and Blu-ray, when you went back to a Blockbuster store back in the the late 90s, right? We had like these two options that were available, and then all of a sudden Blu-ray became the standard. There was the war was over. There was a tipping point that was reached. Okay, and I think the good news here is that Blu-ray moment of victory, I think it's safe to say that it's kind of arrived here. What we've seen is that the overwhelming majority of the industry has rallied around this particular standard. And so the question of how can we get this standard to win and be successful, I think that's kind of been decided for us. The tipping point has happened, and all that any other company has to do now is just kind of reach out and grab it. Let me also say that, this is an open source standard, and so it's not held as proprietary secret. Yeah. This stuff is available on the website. You can reach out and grab it. And if you want to participate in this network, all the digital resources that you need to play are right there on the website.
So we need to spread out the message very heavily, very strongly. So thank you very much for your very interesting presentation and very enlightening, as I already said.
Yeah, one moment, Teresa, Yang Hua wanted to talk. I will just see whether she wants.
Oh, okay. I couldn't see.
She raised her hand. Yang Hua, do you want to make a comment from your side? You can unmute and talk if you. Okay, we will take up Yang Hua in subsequent session. So yeah, I think she's unable to connect now.
So Harry, can I move on or?
Yeah, you can move on. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
So,
Thank you.
thank you again to Professor Robert Behrens. I will move on to the adoption of conclusions and recommendations. And I will read these recommendations so that you can comment on them. The experts group noted with appreciation the ongoing extra budgetary projects that support the application of UNFC, in particular, the European Commission funded project to support UNECE member states in development and implementation of UNFC and UNRMS. And second, the integrated energy and water resource management in support of sustainable development in Southeast Europe and Central Asia, funded by the United Nations Development Account. So, any comment on this?
Yes, if I may. It's more of an editorial or terminological issue. The United Nations Development Account projects are not extra budgetary. They are from the regular budget. We can work on that. I would consider that editorial. I'm just pointing it out that it needs to be changed. Maybe just to say the ongoing projects that support the application of UNFC, and then there is one extra budgetary project indeed, and there is a UNDA project.
Thank you. Comment taken, and we will correct. Thank you very much. Harry?
Yeah, it is corrected. We will. I will also like to mention that we will hear about the case studies from Europe in the afternoon session on Friday, session 10. Today we have heard a lot from the UNDA and RPTC funded projects, but more is coming soon. So please log in to that respective sessions to hear about this wonderful case studies. Thank you.
Thank you, Harry. So now it's my turn to thank all our speakers in this session with such an interesting cases and experience from several countries, and ended with this excellent keynote speech. And I would like to ask you, or to please ask you to join us for the session 4 that is going to take place this afternoon. It's about new UNFC specifications to support COVID green recovery and environmental and social governance investments. The session will start at 3 p.m. Geneva, 2 o'clock in United Kingdom and Portugal. So it will take place on Zoom platform. I should thank now all interpreters for the very good job done, and see you in the afternoon.
Teresa,
or in the evening.
If I may, just a very brief note that this session and the session yesterday afternoon, and there will be 4 more sessions during this week that are arranged under the framework of the United Nations Development Account project that I reported on today. And I would also like to thank our colleagues from UNDP Istanbul Regional Hub for helping us with the Zoom connection and with interpretation. Thank you.
Thank you, Oleg. It was a very good combination of us two. Thank you. So now it will be the time to say goodbye and see you in session 4. Thank you.